So guys, we are going to get started. As I mentioned, please put away your Zentangles. You might have time to work on that later. I really need you pay attention to what we're starting today. Looks like I need to grab myself some pencils. Because we are going to talk about shading. Alright, so remember, if you look at the front of your pencils, it tells you all the different pencils that are in your pencil box. So it goes from 10B to 6H. I'm not sure why we're grabbing this stuff right now. I thought we just did that. And it was written on the board when you came in. Drawing supplies definitely includes your pencils. So, the 10B is going to be our darkest pencil. It is the softest. It's not actually lead, it's graphite. And that is going to be our darkest. And then if you look at the bottom and go up, they are going to get lighter as you go. Obviously, any pencil can be darker the harder that you push. But if I take my 6H and I make as dark of a mark as I can, going over it a couple times, you can see that I'm still going to get a darker value with that 10B pencil. So the harder leaded pencils are not going to be able to match the value of those softer pencils. And that's why for drawing we have all these different pencils, because we want a lot of different values. Value just means how dark something is. So when you are shading something, you are going to have very few areas that are going to stay white. That is because the only areas that are really going to be white are the areas that the light is directly hitting, and those are the brightest spots in the picture. You should have some whites, light grays, medium grays, dark grays. Everything has a value, okay? A lot of you, when you draw a picture, right? So if I'm drawing a quick face here, right? And then you want to do like a little shading here, and then you leave all of this white. No one's face is as white as snow all the way over. It is many different values, okay? So when you are shading, we are going to focus today on just regular shading. We'll talk about other types of shading. When I shade, here's what I am not doing. Number one, I am not doing this. Okay? This is called scribbling. This is how preschoolers and kindergartners color things in. This is not what your shading should look like, okay? A lot of your shading on your self-portraits looks like this. And what we also call this is lack of effort, which is something that has been going around in some of my classes anyway, all right? You have to actually put a little bit of effort into art to make it look decent. So what you want to do when you are shading, notice I hold my pencil a lot different when I shade. I'm holding it very lightly at the end, and I am going to make small little lines here, right? I can't see the streakiness of each one of my lines because I'm doing small little lines together that are building up. If this side is going to be darker, then I'm going to keep shading on that side. And if I keep building it up, then I can go from a darker value into a lighter value. And if I wanted it even darker than that, then I could switch up to one of my B pencils and still layer a little bit more on there, okay? But I am not pushing really hard. I'm very lightly making these small marks. And I just keep building up that value to the darkness that I want it to be. If I want this to kind of smooth into each other, you guys can use the blending stumps. I hate them because I hate the feeling of paper on paper. It makes me shiver and drives me crazy, kind of like nails on a chalkboard. So I just use my finger, which a lot of people say you shouldn't do because it puts oils on your paper. But you can see that I can then blend this so it is a little smoother going from dark to light. All right, so we're using little small marks, we're building them up on top of each other. If I have a really dark value, I'm not just gonna go in with my darkest pencil, you know, and start coloring it as hard as I can. So that's also going to dent my paper, and I really don't want that. Instead, I'm going to use light marks and just continue to go over it and build it up. And eventually I will get to that dark tone without ruining my drawing or my paper. Another thing about when you are shading something, so this is way out of my comfort zone. Some of my kids in my other class for their Black Walnut Festival were wanting to do something scary, so I started this, and you can see I haven't gotten very far on the shading. So as you can see, and a lot of you I think do this, if you look at this right now, this is not, I mean, you can tell what it is, but there's a lot of problems with it, right? I mean, and everybody worries about the nose. My nose looks terrible right now because all I have done is kind of sketched in some lines of where the shading is going to go. You're not going to be able to do a nose without shading. You want to get your entire sketch sketched out before you start shading. This took me about 2 hours to get on the paper. It was a lot of drawing, erasing, redrawing, erasing, redrawing. And when I'm sketching, I'm using very light lines, right, that I can erase easily. Then I go in and start shading, because once I start shading, that gets a lot harder to erase. If I try to erase the shading around my eyes right now, there's no way that's all gonna come off the paper, all right? When I shade, I like to shade my darkest parts first. And of course that again is going to make it look a little weird at first, right? But I like to do the darkest parts first because then I can see that a lot of my other values need to be a lot darker than I might make them otherwise. So I'm just building this up to make it darker. One difficult thing about graphite, especially when you get into the darker tones, is it does tend to cause a reflection. It gets shiny when it's on your paper. And notice I'm doing this right here a little lighter because that's where you can see like his real eye that is underneath there, which is super creepy, but I hate scary movies, by the way. I do not watch them. They stress me out. When I watch something, I want to relax and not jump and be all nervous the whole time. So I'm leaving that a little lighter, and then I can go in with a lighter pencil. So you can see those are two different values. And then in my picture, there's also one spot on that part that is his real eye. Get this open. Where you can see the light reflecting off the skin. So if I can get my eraser open. So you guys all have these kneaded erasers. These are going to be used a lot when you are shading for a couple different things. For one, and when you use your kneaded eraser, you're going to stretch it out. It's kind of like putty. This is an older one, it's not stretching quite as good. Okay, two things you can use this for. If you think you have shaded something too dark, you can push this on it and you can see that it pulls up some of that graphite and makes it lighter than what it was. So that is one way that you can use it. The other way is if I just want to do a small spot where I'm going to show light, I can take my eraser into a point and I can go right into that spot and lighten that up some. I might want to lighten this a little too. And then sorry, I had too large of an area darkened. So you can see I got to go back in with that value, make sure I'm just getting that teeny tiny area where the light is hitting. Okay, so actually I think the area around it needs to be just a little darker, so I'm just layering that right on top. So you are not going to be able to draw and shade an entire drawing just like, instantly. This takes time of building things up. And again, effort is something a lot of you need to be working on. I get it. You're not going to be an artist, right? You are taking this class for your fine arts credit. But at some point you have to have some kind of pride in what you're doing. You can't just slop something down on a piece of paper and turn it in and call it done. I promise it is not going to kill you to put a little bit of effort into it. Especially if you're someone who's often getting done before everyone else. Go back and put a little more time into it. All right, so this line I know is a little darker. Okay. But then as it comes up, it's going to get lighter. Again, I'm going to shade this part some because his skin is not, snowy white. And then I'm going to blend that. And then go back in, because right where that line is where it's the darkest. And this kind of goes into here. And then when you do that blending, it really helps build that up. Shading is what gives it form, makes it look more three-dimensional. So what you guys are going to do today, in your sketchbook, you are going to make yourself a value scale that you will then have in your sketchbook to look at when you're doing your drawings. It's going to go from no value all the way up to the darkest value. That way when you do your drawings, you will be able to compare this to your drawing and make sure that you are using a lot of different values. So in order to make this, what you're going to do is up here or at the bottom, either way. Okay, I'm going to use my ruler to make a nice straight line. So I'm going to push down on the ruler and I'm going to pull my pencil all the way across to make this line. Okay? Once I get that line, I know I want this to be 1 inch tall. So I'm going to make sure that my line is on 0, and at this end I'm gonna make a mark at 1 inch. In the middle, I'm gonna make a mark at 1 inch. And then at this end, I'm gonna make a mark at 1 inch. 3 spots is always better than 2 to make sure you're getting something straight. Then I can line my ruler up with those marks. And now my rectangle is 1 inch tall, okay? Once I get this rectangle, I know that I want each square to be 3/4 of an inch wide. Now, I didn't realize how difficult of a time some of my other classes would have with 3/4 of an inch. So if you look up here, okay, 1 inch is gonna be right here. In the middle of that is 1/2 inch. So this mark right here is my 3/4 of an inch mark. There's 1, 2, 3/4. So I'm gonna line it up at 0 again. I'm gonna make a mark at 3/4. Move my 0 there, 3/4. And I'm gonna keep doing that all the way down. So this is gonna split this larger rectangle into smaller boxes when I'm done. So I'm just gonna keep marking 3/4 of an inch until I run out of paper. Okay, and the last one might be a little bigger than 3/4, but that's okay. And then if you wanted nice straight lines, you would use your ruler. I'm just gonna I'm pretty good at straight lines for the most part, and they don't have to be exactly perfect. So I'm gonna split this up. And then underneath, I am going to number them from 0, which means 0 value, all the way up to 10, okay? Now, you're gonna notice you have more pencils than there are boxes. You're not gonna use every single pencil. And in fact, you might only use maybe 3 of these pencils because, for instance, so my 0, I'm gonna leave blank, that's 0 value. For my 1, this is gonna be super light, okay? And again, notice I'm using these light, tiny marks. If you start too dark, you're gonna run out of room. You're gonna get dark too fast and you're not gonna be able to get darker. And then I'm gonna blend that. And you can see there's barely a difference there. That's what we want. Each one is barely a jump. So for my 2, I'm still gonna stick with that pencil. I'm just gonna I'm gonna go over it a little more, maybe use a little more pressure. Right? Again, I'm not scribbling. I'm doing these small little marks. And then I'm gonna blend that, okay? So you can see it's just barely jumping there. For 3, I'm still using my 6H. But I'm going just a little bit darker. So this is what you're gonna do the whole way across. Each time you want it to get just a little bit darker. So now blend that. So you can see there's not, and I might want that even just a little darker than that. A little bit more of a jump. So you're gonna keep getting just a little darker until you get all the way, when you get to 10, this is gonna be your darkest one. And again, I don't want you pushing down super hard and warping the paper. We're still using light marks. We're just gonna go over it a couple of times and layer it on there. So once I get my base in, my base, then I'm gonna go in and start darkening it up. Okay, I'm pushing a little harder, but I'm not pushing so hard that it's denting my paper. I'm gonna keep going until I get that nice, super dark value that would be the darkest spot on anything I'm drawing. This is gonna be where the most shadow is, where the light is not hitting at all. Bring that in. Sometimes it helps people to do like the first few, then go dark and start working backwards. That's up to you. But your task today is to get this filled in as your reference. And I will be walking around to help. We should have plenty of time to get this done. And that's all.